coaching calls. Here with us today is the founder of Nido Marketing, Matt Hillis. Matt, thanks for being here.
Hello.
And we also have our illustrious community manager, Deneen Goncalves. Deneen, how did I do?
Great, you're getting there.
I did it, Deneen. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And today we're talking about email newsletters, which might be, I think it's the Trojan horse of digital marketing. I think that email could potentially be one of the most important facets of our marketing campaign. And I'm excited to dive in. Before we go too far, though, we want to ask Matt about his Australia trip.
Australia was incredible. I was really honored to be a guest speaker at the Montessori Australia Foundation retreat in Sydney. For those of you that have never been to Australia, you should go. I had a great time just in terms of the culture and people, but what I really enjoyed was actually talking to different Montessorians from the other side of the world, literally, and realizing that we all share very, very similar problems. They may differ in terms of execution and may differ in terms of the direct details, but in general, we all struggle at times working with parents. We all struggle with times with enrollment. We all struggle with times with recruiting guides. It really reinforced kind of this idea that we are all doing the same work, and we can all get better if we communicate more and talk more about what best practices are. And so that's one of the things that I'm excited about with Nido, is that we're trying to push that out to people in the United States, people around the world, in Australia, about what is the best way to market your Montessori school online.
That's awesome. Thanks for doing that, Matt. Do we have any Australian members joining up for Nido, you think?
Well, we got 10 new enrollments, I think, for people from Australia. But I think it's, 16 hours ahead. So probably not, probably not on 2 a.m. on the 2 a.m. Conference call, but they can watch the replay.
Awesome. And that's actually kind of a good segue, is we record all of these calls. They're all available to you inside of the Nido member area. We've carved out a place specifically for the coaching calls. And this came from the feedback that we were getting from members that, hey, we don't really know where to start. So when you're in the members area, just go to the Start Here button in your main menu. And you'll notice that we talk about the Montessori Marketing Method. And you can choose to attend from here. And you can also view all of the previous coaching calls. And this is call number 19. Can you believe that? We've done quite a bit here.
I have no idea how that happened.
Yeah, I say bravo to us. So without further ado, email marketing. I've got 3 data points that I'd like to share, and then I think I'll turn it over to Matt and Deneen to talk about email marketing specifically from a Montessori context. But email continues to be the highest performing digital marketing avenue, and it's the lowest cost. So it can make you the most money and cost you the least amount. Email has nearly 30% higher ROI than direct mail, which I think is especially pertinent to our listeners, because I imagine quite a few Montessori schools are doing direct mail. Now, we don't want to talk you out of direct mail. We think it's a great idea, and Matt's been very successful with it and talked about it on another coaching call. But it's important to know that email marketing tends to be more effective. And I think when used in tandem, I imagine they probably amplify each other. Matt, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I'm a big proponent of email in general, just because it's free. And when you own your list, it is a huge asset to have. It can never be, I didn't come up with this term. There's smarter people than me coined the phrase digital sharecropping. When your list is based upon Facebook or Instagram or any type of other social media network, those terms of services can change quickly. The use of them by your audience can change, and then all of a sudden, if nobody's on Facebook anymore, you're not going to have a way of communicating with them. When you own an email list, that is an asset that you will have forever, because email continues to be the most intimate of communication platforms on the internet.
And what's interesting about Montessori schools is you're actively building your list as people come into tour or refer new parents. And honestly, in avenues that you might not even think about, strategic partners and vendors, adding people to your list just helps you kind of amplify your message.
Absolutely.
The second point I wanted to make, this data point came in my research. Email is 40 times more effective at acquiring new customers than Facebook or Twitter. And this comes from McKinsey, and I think they produce some of the best studies online for marketers. And I just wanted to reference a study briefly. Here's a comparison of email versus all of the other marketing avenues that they tested. You notice TV is there at the bottom. But here's paid search. We push paid search, I think, pretty hard here at Nito. Google Ads tends to be one of the best avenues for capturing brand new prospects, but emails beating paid search and affiliate, I think we can look at as referral. So this is something that I'd like to drive home, that email marketing is not to be ignored. It's critically important for our members and something that I think we should definitely take advantage of. And scrolling down a little bit, this is the data point that I have here on my slide, but email beats Facebook and Twitter by 40x for new customer acquisition, which is astounding. I was really shocked when I saw that. But again, it comes directly from McKinsey. This is well cited. The study is really interesting to read too if you have any interest. And the last one has more to do with the way we deliver our email than anything else. 88% of smartphone users actively check email on their phones. And I'm sure everybody on this call can align with that. Most of my initial email responses come from my smartphone. It's one of the first things I do when I wake up in the morning, which might be a little sad and pathetic, but it's also true. And I think it's true for quite a few people. So that means we need to make sure that our emails are very mobile responsive and engage well on smartphones. And moving along, who should you send to? This is, I think, if you don't mind me phrasing it this way, a potential fail point that I've seen with some of our members. After looking and working with so many Montessori schools, I have found that our members are not sending to everybody that I believe that they should be. So, of course you want to send to prospects, but you might even want to send, and Matt and Deneen, I'd love your input here. You might even want to send to past prospects. People that hit towards your school last year and for whatever reason chose not to apply. You don't know what's happened since then. And you don't know what the future looks like for them. So it doesn't make sense not to keep them on your list as long as you can continue to provide them value. Matt, any pushback on that or additional context?
Not at all. I mean, why not? Like, what is the, like, as you said, what is the downside of continuing to send them messages? Sometimes people tour, and it's funny. I got this piece of feedback from a parent who happened to be a friend of a friend. So, I saw them at a holiday party or something, and they had toured, I don't know, 3-4 months earlier and didn't put in an application. And I was curious, about why that. I didn't ask them directly, but through the course of our conversation, it came out that the reason why they didn't submit an application is because they didn't think that their child could do it. That our classrooms were so peaceful and organized, and it was so different than what their expectation was about early childhood programs, that they thought, gosh, my child's so rambunctious, there's no way that they're going to do that. And we all know that Montessori is appropriate for almost every child, and that most children will acclimate extremely well to an environment like that. But the parent had an expectation that was so radically different. And what a great way. I mean, that was the reason why they didn't apply, but what a great way to continue to educate them about Montessori over time so that you can help to change their mind, right? And so, like, why wouldn't I want to continue to send things to people even after they've toured?
Wow, what a great example, Matt. Thanks for sharing that. One point I would like to make along those lines is I think that it's important to segment people according to where they fit in your list. So for somebody who has toured but has not applied, they're not going to get the same narrative in every instance that your existing parents will get. They might get some of it, but they might not get all of it. School holiday update, for instance, that might not be something that we send out to past prospects. But I do believe that if you have somebody's email, kind of like Matt just said, we need to use it. It's free marketing, and the paradigm that I want all of our members to assume is that you're doing them a service. If your emails are good enough, and that's something we can help with, you're helping to educate them about the most important facet of their life, which is their children. And so don't be trepidatious about sending emails, because I think that you're doing them a favor. And if you really look at it that way, then everybody on your email list is somebody that we're actively working to serve and to educate.
Absolutely. Completely agree with that.
I also just wanted to mention briefly that strategic partners, and I don't know if I'm phrasing that correctly, but your staff, board members, other schools, if you have feeder schools, vendors, specific providers, put people on your list that need to know what's going on with your school, because even if they're not, for instance, your marketing agency, if you're working with one, should be on your email list, because they might need to know about new updates or new hires or events you have going on. And one of the best ways to do that is to make sure that they're included in your outgoing information.
Completely agree with that. And it's, again, one of those things where you're looking at, all we're talking about doing is adding somebody to an existing list and sending them content. They're going to decide whether or not they read it. And if they want to unsubscribe, they can unsubscribe. There are worse things than having people unsubscribe from your list. Don't be afraid of that. Don't let that be the barrier that prevents you from actually communicating as much as possible with people who need to know.
Absolutely. And I actively unsubscribe from lists that I'm not interested in. I think that we need to sort of reframe what it means. It's not that they don't like you. It just means that for whatever reason, the content's not applicable, and that's perfectly fine.
Correct.
Deneen, I'd be interested in your opinion as a parent. When you get emails on an inbound basis, specifically from the school that your child is attending right now, and I know I'm not asking you to put anybody on blast, but do you find the emails to be of value, and are they something that you look forward to?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually usually stop what I'm doing to read it. And it reminds me of things that I need to put on my calendar. And I really rely on that email to do it. So I look forward to it. It's every Wednesday. It's predictable. And it contains a lot of really great information. We also get weekly emails from the teachers on Fridays with pictures, which are always fun because you scroll down and you try to find your child. That's a big one too.
How are they sending those emails? Do they use MailChimp, or is it something else?
It's through MailChimp. Yep.
Okay. So that's interesting. How's that setup work then? Does every teacher have access to MailChimp and then they have their own segmented list?
Yeah, I think she was using school cues, tried it, and then moved from school cues to MailChimp because it was just easier and allowed for more pictures to be uploaded into it. So I think this is a new endeavor, and every teacher has access to their own list.
That's very cool. The school my little guys go to, they were just sending out an email directly from Gmail and BCCing everybody, that's a little flawed. And you don't want to do that because it can get your domain name flagged for spam potentially. So if your teachers are sending out emails directly, I'd strongly recommend using a tool like MailChimp, and then the structure that we just defined that Deneen mentioned her school is using, or her children's school is using. I think that's better. Matt, what does your school do? What does Bergamo do for outbound for the teachers?
So for teachers to be able to do it, we do use MailChimp. And what's nice about MailChimp is they have a service where, so rather than having the teachers log into MailChimp to send out, that's going to be impossible, especially with 19 guides to give 19 different logins and send them through MailChimp. There's a remailer email that they can get for their specific classroom list. So they can send out an email to everybody on who's listed in their classroom, both parents, for every child, and they just send it to this email address, this kind of dummy email address, which then remails it to everybody in their classroom. What's nice about that too is because we have somebody who's maintaining the data integrity of the list. They don't have to keep an updated email list in their email client, right? Because what happens is, somebody calls the office and says, "Oh, I want you to start sending emails to this email address and not my work email." But then if that doesn't get out to the teacher and they're still continuing to send it to the old email address, it frustrates the parent. So what's nice about MailChimp is that it's our master database, and when it's updated, it's going to send it out to all the correct emails.
Matt, what you just said is of immense value. I'd love for us to build a course on that. That's great.
It's been really popular, actually. So initially, we had it's been popular with our guides, I should say, because initially, it was a big struggle. How are we even going to get all this data to teachers every year about, hey, here's all the emails from everybody in your class? I mean, it's just we send them a spreadsheet, and they need to import it into their email client, and then it's just something that they never really got around to doing, as opposed to, we're going to maintain the database. Here's the email. If you want to send something out to your parents, and quite honestly, this could even be like a one-off thing. They're going on an overnight, and you need to send out something from your phone to all your parents, like, hey, reminder, we're meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. that's real easy to do, as opposed to, hey, log into MailChimp and here's how you use MailChimp. I mean, that's a whole separate thing that we're just not going to get around to, versus send an email to this email address and it's going to go out to everybody that you need to get it to.
So I've never heard of this, Matt. This is a first for me. You just taught me something really awesome. Just to repeat what I think I heard and make sure that I'm on the right page. You can create basically a spoof email inside of MailChimp and define the list that it belongs to. And when the teacher sends an email to that email address, it goes out to the list that's assigned to that teacher.
Yep. All the teachers need to do to send an email to their entire class is just put that in their phone as like, master email, master contact email. And it's like this Gmail spoofed address, this MailChimp spoofed address. And then when they send an email to that email address, it then sends it out to the 30 or 60 or 90 people on their class list.
Wow. How did I not know about that? That's amazing.
MailChimp's pretty awesome. It's free.
Yeah, David just said this is a really helpful tip. Thanks for chiming in, David. So we have to build a course about this, of course, because that's that's unbelievable. And is that included in the free version or is that paid?
We don't pay anything for MailChimp, so 100% free.
So the only thing I'll say to that is you got to be really careful about who gets a hold of that email, because people could do some damage with accidentally sending something there.
It could. The only people that would know that would be our communications director and the guide. So I guess, if somehow their phone got compromised or their computer got compromised, technically, but you can also go into MailChimp and just reset the email address very easily. So it's not difficult to do. One of the things I like about MailChimp is that it's just easy to use, and they've made a lot of under the hood improvements over the last year. And again, it's free. So why not?
Yeah. What a great pro tip, Matt. Thank you. That's why we do these calls. I'm actually a little mad at you for not telling me that you're doing this before, because that's just so good.
No worries.
Quick question about segmentation. I think you told me this, and I'm putting words in your mouth, but you segment by birth year, not program, correct? So that you don't have to keep moving people throughout folders?
Yeah, that's correct. So, in California, we have pretty defined age levels for our programs, meaning especially in early childhood, it's very clear when they're going to be an infant, when they're going to be in toddler, when they're going to be in primary. Primary can be a little bit gray because they could start as young as 2.5 all the way up to 3. But anyway, we do it by age so that it's easier to send them the correct type of content. So we know that if a child is 2.5, we're definitely going to be sending the parent information about primary programs, versus if the child is 6 months, we're going to be, talking mostly about infant programs and toddler programs, because that's what they are available to enroll in.
Got it. That's very helpful.
Hey, by the way, it's funny. I'm looking, I just got an email from my son's teacher saying, please send warm coats, hats, and mittens. So along that line, it's snowing here in Minnesota. So she had to send that out. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. And what a great way to do it too. If you have Matt's setup, I mean, that just became the easiest. You can fire that right off from her phone.
Now I'm curious. I don't know if this kind of falls under this conversation, but do we have ideas for text messages too, aside from email communication? Is that a feature that people have thought about, or is this even involved in this conversation?
No. No, it's not involved in this conversation. I'm actually, from text messages, I'm actually not a fan of that or I'm not a fan of putting that in all of our teachers' hands to start texting, doing group text. I think that could get excessive easily, and it's it feels a little bit invasive to me, unless this is an emergency, right? Or this is something that's, again, I get back to that thing about we've got an overnight trip tomorrow and we're changing the time from 8:30 to 9:30 that we're meeting. That is really appropriate, I think, for a group text. And, but if we set up some type of group texting feature to have, to go out to parents, I think that may actually lead to a level of disengagement. I could be wrong about that. It just feels a little bit too close for comfort.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have clarified. I meant more of like notifications versus like, here's your newsletter in a text message, which would be
what type of notifications?
Yeah, and it sounds like Kim, she uses Remind app for text messages for emergency and notifications only, which could be a nice add to, rather than email, so then families see it quicker.
And I just pulled up Remind here on the screen. I've not heard of this before, but Kim, this looks great. It looks like it's free too. Is that correct? You don't pay anything for this?
That would be awesome.
Yeah. Wow. It's 100% free, Kim says. So thank you so much for this great pro tip. That's 2 in 2 minutes. Can you believe how quickly these are coming?
What value do we have here in Nito, right?
No, it's unreal. So I'm going to go to school and remind, and I think we're going to build a course on this as well, because to Deneen's point, I think it'd be great to be able to, have the Montessori equivalent of the presidential alert, like, hey, started snowing really bad, we need coats.
Right. Or even just cancellations. I know it doesn't happen often on the West Coast, but there's school cancellations or even delays. Those are great.
Absolutely. Kim, thank you so much for this. This is fantastic. We're going to include this in our resources section. So now we're on what to include in your newsletter. And this is something that we get quite a bit of questions on. I think, just like blogging, people come back and say, hey, what are we supposed to write about? And I think, Deneen, you just had a really good example. It's snowing. Is this the first snow of the season?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really snow. It's kind of like ice pellets, but yeah, it is.
It's raining frozen water from the sky. I'm from Arizona. That sounds horrible. But, you get to send out just a quick update and request. I think that thought leadership should be the focus. You always want to assume the position of thought leader. And Matt, I think you do that very well. And you do it well with MariaMontessori.com, and you do it well with Bergamo. You're educating your subscribers is the way that I would look at that. And I'd love for your thoughts and ideas around how you come up with that content.
That's a great question. My bias is actually sometimes I think as Montessorians, we can get way too caught up with what it is we want parents to know versus what parents want to know about us. And that's the paradigm that I really like to focus on, is answering their questions first. Yes, we have a prescribed program that we need to get out to people about the basic tenets of Montessori. However, that should be done after we answer their individual questions about who we are and what we do. A great example of that is what I mentioned about what that parent said to me at the party about she didn't think that her child could do this. I don't think that's an uncommon thought where that's an objection, right? And I like to start with those objections that people have to Montessori first before we get into kind of a prescribed parent education program. And quite honestly, I think that parent education is best done in person too, for those longer form topics about Montessori. So that's either a Montessori 101 that you're doing in person, or kind of those courses, those in-person courses. When people are still in the interest phase and they're considering your school, I like to base it much more about what their needs are versus what our needs are.
That's really well said. Deneen, out of curiosity, we have quite a bit of communication coming directly from the guides. What is it that you like to speak to and talk about? Are there some favorite topics, and how do you come up with those?
That's a good question. To piggyback off of what Matt said, I mean, I think being able to appeal to parenting in general is where you really get them. So one theme that's going on in my life right now is how to handle tantrums, and do it in a respectful manner and where, both parties feel successful. And so there's a ton of articles and a ton of content that kind of mirror what we do in Montessori, but even that, where you don't even have Montessori in the explanation of that, but just how you approach problem solving with your children can be, something in your emails. Because again, I always go back to parenting partners, right? When you've got young children, you really don't feel like you know what you're doing, or you do for a little while, and then they throw something out of left field and you're like, wait a minute. So if your school can be at the front end of that and provide a lot of really great advice and ideas that go along with what you do in the classroom, I think that's a really great bridge.
That's really well said too. Thank you for that. I have a question. I recently started engaging with an organization, and I think I've mentioned it on another coaching call, but it's called Story Brand. And it's founded by a gentleman named Donald Miller, who wrote a book of the same name. And his entire emphasis is on marketing and communication through the use of story and narrative. and I'm not recommending necessarily that Montessorians go through StoryBrand. I'm just bringing it up here so we know what I'm referencing. But one of the things that he does, I think, so well in his emails is he starts with a story, and every single email he sends begins with just a quick anecdote. It's typically humorous. Sometimes it's really heartfelt. I'm curious as to how effective, and I guess this is a question for both Matt and Deneen, you think that might be for this environment, knowing what you know about your parents?
I love it. I love that idea. Again, I think it just brings people to the reality of what it is to be a parent and how to parent your children in this challenging world. I love that. It can be just a quick, hey, this is what happened at dinner, and what do you think about this? And then the whole article can be about how to incorporate your child in cooking and cleaning up and that whole process, which of course goes right along the lines of what we do. So I love that idea. It's a great segue into other topics.
Yeah, I think storytelling is something that is we could definitely improve as for Montessori schools, because what it does is it's taking this conceptual topic, and Montessori can be hard to really kind of wrap your head around when it can get very ethereal. And I think that when we're starting out with a story about the representation of this physically that's happening, between human beings, I think that makes it so much more real and relatable versus, we're talking about, independence or cosmic education or all these other things. If you can actually show what that looks like and tell a compelling story from the beginning, I think it makes it much more effective.
Yeah, you know what? One thing that occurs to me, Matt, is the story you told about the parent that thought their child wasn't going to be able to, quote unquote, do this. I think that'd be such an effective email for prospects that just took a tour or are just about to take a tour, even maybe, that kind of set the preface. But you tell the story just the way you told it here on this webinar, and it immediately breaks down that barrier, but it does it in a way that's not general. It's very specific to somebody else's experience.
I completely agree with you.
Awesome. We've got some other ideas here up on the slide that you can take. These aren't written in stone. It's really about just staying in touch with your parents, making sure that they feel that you're engaged. You're working so hard. And you know that, and they know that too, but sometimes it's nice as a parent to be reminded. And, sometimes when a school fails to communicate, it can come across as disengaged. And so I think email is one of the really easy and expensive ways to make sure that parents know that, that you're there and you're keeping them up to date on everything that you're doing. Okay, so let's get a little nitty gritty. Crafting the perfect subject line. These are rules of thumb. Rules are made to be broken. But they're still, you want to break the rules only after you know what they are. One of my strong opinions, and something that I've seen a lot of thought leaders come out of the woodwork and say, is to dedicate each email to one topic. Anytime you dilute your email and try to get too many things across, you tend to have a lower engagement rate. Now, that doesn't mean you can't refer to other things. In the email templates we send our members, we save little sections for news and events, and that's perfectly fine. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Deneen, did I lose you?
I'm here.
Can you guys hear me? Sorry.
Facing connection issues. Oh.
I hear you, yeah.
Yeah, and I can hear you too. I think we lost Qasim. But anyway, Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about, topics for creating it? Do you have some info on that?
Well, let's see here.
Did I lose you guys?
Hey, are you there?
Am I back?
You're back.
Wow, so sorry. I don't know what happened.
No worries.
Yeah, I did it. Where did you lose me?
You were talking about, well, you were actually just right at the beginning.
Okay,
so I would start over.
I've been droning on and on this entire time. First and most important, I think, is to dedicate each email to a single topic so that we don't dilute the focus. Even if you get your first topic across, the theory anyway in email marketing is that people are going to remember what they last read. And so you end up kind of jumping them off onto a tangent that might not be as important. So try to dedicate emails to a single topic. Matt and Deneen both, I'm curious as to your opinions on that, because I know that sometimes we tend to break those rules internally as well.
I think it's a hard rule to stick to, but I think it's really important because it allows you to explain what you need to explain without kind of going off on tangents, which I think in Montessori land we tend to do just naturally. So it's a good rule to think about and come back to. Matt, I'm curious what your thoughts are with that.
I mean, my thoughts are to keep everything bite size. Sometimes we fill up that plate. I use that analogy. When my mother goes to a buffet, she has a hard time. And Deneen, Pam, right? So she loves everything. She loves everything and everybody, and every topic. And it's kind of hard to choose like what I'm gonna eat now. So she'll literally come back with this plate that is full with everything in the buffet, and she'll eat like maybe 20% of it. And it's so wasteful and it's not very efficient. When we're looking at content, I think that we have the same type of problem where it's like, I want to tell you everything. And it's hard for somebody to digest, versus if you can break it down into these little bite-sized snack pieces. That's actually the trick, is that you have to take a big concept and put it into 20 different types of things when we're talking about independence. And that's where you're getting into this idea that there is so much content to produce, right? This is something you literally can send out an email once a week about Montessori forever, because we will never run out of things to talk about. But you can't talk about practical life is not one email. Practical life is 25 emails, because you can break that down into all these little things that people can then digest and make sense of, versus giving them everything at once.
Absolutely. And just to refer back, a couple weeks ago, we talked about content schedules, and this could fit very neatly into that process. So if you haven't seen or listened to that one, go back to that one, because that was a good conversation.
Thanks for that reference, Deneen. The next bullet point here, the 4U method, this actually comes from Michael Masterson. I'm a really big fan of his. He's the founder of the Oxford Club. I think he also wrote Ready, Fire, Aim. The 4U method is something he developed for content in general, but it really applies to email very well. It's urgent, unique, ultra specific, and useful. And what I've heard him say about urgent, because that's the one that turns everybody off, is it doesn't need to be open this now, today only. It's urgent is really interchangeable with important. And he's just using the word urgent here because it's better than the 3UI method. But you want to make sure that, urgent can be something that's just ultra relevant to them right now. It's important to what it is that the parent is doing, and oftentimes that relates back to their kids. So just about anything that relates to their children is important. But to Matt's point with bite size, I think that also kind of fits into ultra specific. Let's get down to the nitty gritty now. We're past theory and overarching 50,000 foot views, and now we're in this useful field of tangible quality content where you can actually tell parents, hey, here's how we wash dishes and why, or whatever ultra specific thing that we want to share. But I think keeping this 4U method in mind is helpful for creating quality content. Did I just overstep my bounds there trying to come up with a Montessori example?
Not at all.
Awesome. Keep your subject lines short. This is one I break all the time, and I think for good reason. I think if you have a compelling subject line, use it. But remember that people are viewing their emails for the first time from their smartphone, and the smartphone typically truncates subjects. So you want to make sure that your most important words are in the beginning, even if that means that they're oddly phrased. You'll often see really good marketers use a key term and then use a colon, almost as though they're establishing the subject. Like email marketing : how to do it best, instead of how to do the best email marketing. Don't use capital words. Try not to, I shouldn't use the word hate. I strongly dislike when people drop emojis and imagery into their subject lines. I immediately archive and ignore them. It looks instantly spammy. I do, however, really like it when people use names. So you can use what's called an include tag in most email marketing tools. MailChimp's one of them. And you can actually say, hey, Matt, comma, and then jump off. And that just lets them know, like, I know you well enough to have your name in my database.
Now, this may be totally creepy because you can do the same thing with the name of the child.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think that, that's something that I actually don't have a clear read on yet. I know that we would get many more opens if opens of our email if the email subject line said, "Here's what you need to know about Kyle's development, et cetera," right? That would get opened. However, I worry at times that people could be turned off by the fact that we're referencing the name of their child. So I think that could actually be much more useful coming once they're enrolled, once their child is enrolled, and you're sending them maybe a parent education series because then you have a relationship with them. I think that could be really, really useful versus using that before they've enrolled.
That's a great idea. The parent education series, I like that. The last thing I want to make note of, and this is something that we don't do quite as well internally because from a managerial perspective, it's very difficult to do for every single one of our members. So that aside, I think that split testing can be done well, but it probably needs to be done by you. This is a difficult done for you service for an agency to provide. The way to split test, the easiest way is just split your list into 2 groups. And it can be arbitrary. If you have a list of 1,000 people, split it into 500 and 500, and then you send subject line A to the first 500, subject line B to the second 500. If you want to get more nuanced than that, something that comes from Perry Belcher, who's one of the co-founders of Digital Marketer, he actually takes 10% of his list first, and then he splits that 10% into 2 and tests his subject. And whichever subject has the highest opens, then he takes the remaining 90% and sends all of them that subject line. Now, I don't know that we need to go that far per se with all of our emails, but if you have really important marketing emails, it might be worth doing once or twice because you'll start to identify common denominators. Wow, people really respond strongly when I use these words or this term or that verb. It's not hard. It just takes some time and some thought as far as coming up with various subjects and split testing them. Matt, any insight into how you split subjects, assuming that you do?
It's something that is on my list as a digital marketer to be able to do. I am not good at that, to be honest with you. I'm much more better at kind of the idea of creating content ideas and crafting the content. I'd love to be able to get to the point where I'm split testing headlines.
I'm not very good at it either, which I'm ashamed to admit because I'm supposed to be a marketer myself, but it's something I'd like to get a lot better at. And something that someone close to me said recently was really interesting. They said that your entire content is at the mercy of your subject line. If your subject line isn't good enough to get somebody to open up an email, then the email copy doesn't matter. And I know that that's not like earth-shattering news, but I haven't always really given that the credence that I think that it deserves.
Yeah, I think, listen, subject lines and headlines are extremely important because this is the gateway to people reading your content. People are going to evaluate whether or not they're going to open your email or read your article within the first 10 seconds, probably 5 seconds. And if the headline does not engage with them, they won't do it. That said, I have used swipe files for headlines actually pretty effectively for email subject lines and headlines. So that's something that I would recommend. It's probably something we should put up on Neato, just a swipe file for email subject lines. That could be helpful.
Oh, I'm writing that down.
Can you explain really quickly what a swipe file is, Matt?
Yeah, a swipe file is basically just that concept where you can swipe all these headlines that I've used, all these email subject lines that I've used, because there are certain formulas that exist in copywriting that work better than others. And there's a ton of swipe files available on the internet from digital marketing companies where they'll give you email subject headlines, basically things that have worked in the past, things that have been proven to work. But what I like, the idea about using it for Neato is that these are things that have worked for Montessori schools because we don't want to be kind of spammy or cheesy. And sometimes email subject lines can get a little bit too extra for me, for lack of a better word. But for Montessori, it has to be a little bit more nuanced. So that's why I think it could be effective to have. And all that is like it's an Excel spreadsheet or a Word file with just like here's 50 email subject headlines that have worked. You can kind of mix and match according to what you think would work for your school.
It's a great resource.
The highest performing subject line we've had at Solutions 8 is "Why do you hate me?" And it's the email that we send out to prospects after we've tried to reach out to them 8 times, because 8 is the magic number where after that you've hopefully engaged with 80% of your prospects. And if they haven't responded, then they get an email subject that says, "Why do you hate me?" It has our highest open rate, but it's also, like you said, very tongue-in-cheek, and you're not going to get away with it more than once. that's why we use it as our last ditch effort.
Yeah, I get that.
Email best practices, a little more nitty gritty, also very important. We talked about the importance of segmentation. I just want to hit it again. You have to make sure that you split up your list according to where people fit, because otherwise you inhibit your ability to communicate with them properly. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have everybody on a master list, which is, I think, good for, let's say your generic weekly broadcast, but make sure that you can send to people based on the program their child is in, whether or not they're current or past prospect. Have an alumni list. There could be a massive amount of value for being able to reach out to those folks. So keep your list segmented. It's easy to do if you start out clean and fresh. If you already have a list that's not segmented, don't lose heart. What I do is keep that list, put it aside, and then start your segments now. And then just as you add parents, slowly build on those segments. Emphasis on mobile design. Emails are more often than not going to be engaged with a mobile device, and so just make sure that your email can be seen on a mobile device. My opinion, and Matt and Deneen, I'd love for you to check me on this, but I actually really prefer plain text emails. Emails that look like they came from a person. They don't have a massive amount of design or HTML. I can tell you that the HTML doesn't load on my mobile device because I have my settings set to not load for both speed and then also security. So it just looks like these broad empty boxes. I'm not a really big fan of the heavy design. Any agreement or disagreement there?
Personally, when I get those text emails, I read them more quickly than if I am going to get a designed email. And I think I just do that subconsciously. So maybe to your point, that's exactly what people do. At least that's what I do.
Yeah, I think the designed emails, heavy design, it's an immediate alert that, oh, this is a marketing email. This isn't coming from a person. This is coming from an organization.
Yeah, most of the email marketers that I follow online, Chris Brogan is one, Ramit Sethi is another one. They only do text.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no header image. There's no, it doesn't look like an email newsletter. I mean, it's written personally to you. One of the things I like about what Ramit does is that he will actually put images in the context of the email. So it looks like, almost looks like a blog post, but it is text heavy. And it's like, Dear Matt, right? It's basically like he's writing a direct email to me. One of the things I've noticed too that Chris Brogan does is that he uses a very large font, right? He uses a font that, and Qasim, you may be talking about this coming up, but it's almost like it's much different than your basic email, and it comes through and it's like, wow, it makes it easier to read in some ways for me. And it also really limits the amount of text that he's giving me. So these aren't necessarily long emails; they're just easy to read. You may get into that with the design of the emails in your outline here, Qasim, but wanted to just drop those two knowledge points.
I actually wasn't going to touch on that. I didn't think about it, but I think it's a great point. I've had some Ryan Dice does something really similar, and I agree with you. I think it helps with engagement. So thanks for bringing that up, Matt.
Yep.
Frequency, we tend to recommend our members send out emails weekly. I think that's at a minimum. Deneen mentioned that she gets one email from her school every week and then one email directly from the guide every week. You can't communicate with your parents too often as long as what you're communicating is of value. You could email them every day. I believe that firmly, and I'm open to being challenged on it, as long as what you're saying is something that they want to hear. There are organizations, trading organizations is one I can think of off the top of my head, but they email twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening. And the people that get, the day traders that get those emails want and need them. So as long as you're saying something of value that's providing value to them, then you can't email too often. But I would like to see our members emailing on a weekly basis. At an absolute minimum, make sure you're sending out a monthly newsletter. But I think weekly is more appropriate.
I agree with all those things that you said.
And then be consistent. And Deneen, you just mentioned this, which I love that you brought this up, because you said when does they come out every Wednesday, your email newsletter for your school?
Yep, and then Fridays from the guides.
Yeah, and then that, and you get to look forward to it, which is, I think cool because it establishes a level of continuity.
Right, and I love that it's in the middle of the week because, you're in your groove, and it's just a really nice reminder versus Monday or Friday when you're either closing out the week or you're just starting and you've got a bunch of stuff that you need to dive into. So Wednesday, I feel like, is the sweet spot day.
Wow, that's so funny you said that, because I send out my emails on Friday, and now I need to check that. Matt, when do you send your newsletters?
Well, we send ours on Tuesday. I have lived every single incantation of this with guides and parents, where it's like, we'll send out a survey. What day would you like the updates? I mean, it's all over the place. I think regardless of the day that it's sent out, the most important thing is that it's done consistently at the same time every week, because you're going to get into a rhythm with your community. They're going to adjust to that eventually. And just like when you're building the next school year's calendar, you will never please everybody. I mean, I always use that analogy when I'm releasing the calendar for the next year. Like, listen, somebody's going to be upset about this because they didn't get X, Y, and Z. And it's the same thing with the day that you're sending out your email newsletter, is that for some person, it's not going to be a perfect fit. What you need to do is just make sure that whatever day you choose, it's sent consistently. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, well said. Have a unique style that reflects your school's voice. I think this goes back potentially to storytelling, but people want to know that the email is coming from a person, not an organization. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but that's my preference. I like to see emails that come from a person. When Matt referenced the few examples that he had, Rogan and SETI, both of those are people. Ryan Dice is a person. You remember emails that come from people. I have said before that digital marketing is relationship building, and you can't build a relationship with an organization, at least not nearly as easily as you can build a relationship with a person. So choose someone from your school. It can be your head of school. It can be your director of admissions, and make them the voice and the mouthpiece. They don't even necessarily have to write it. You can ghostwrite it for them, but sign off as a human, because that, I think, is going to get stronger engagement.
And by the way, make sure that person's name is the from sent email.
Oh, great tip. So inside of MailChimp and most email service providers, you can define the from, and you can define the reply to. So, for instance, Matt, being as busy as it is, might not necessarily want everybody's reply to his broadcast email, but we can still make the from his email. And then if they click the reply button, it goes to a more general mailbox.
That is correct.
And last slide here today is how to measure email success. Email is one of the easiest marketing methods to gauge the efficacy of, because there's just not much people can do with it. The first thing you want to focus on is your delivery rate. Do your emails actually land? And if you're getting a lot of hard bounces, that means that you have a dead list, or a list that needs to be scrubbed. And there are a few tools online to do that. We use something called Never Bounce. Really cost effective. I think it's a fraction of a penny per email. If you have a small list, it should just cost you a couple bucks. Yeah. So here we go. 1/8 of a cent, or excuse me, less than that. I don't know what that is. 1/8 of a cent. Pipe in your list, pay Never Bounce. I'm embarrassed at my math. And what they'll do is clean up your emails and make sure that they're relevant and that you're not going to get a bunch of bounces. You don't have to do this unless you have low deliverability rate, but if you do have low deliverability rate, don't throw out your emails either. There's a way to approach this. After looking at deliverability, you want to look at your open rate. Industry standard open rate, they say, is around 15%. I think that's low. Considering who you are and how engaged you are with these folks, I think you should be aiming at well over 20 to 25% would be my expectation.
At the very least, here's the thing: is that we're not some international company selling informational products, or we are a local brick and mortar organization that is in their community, and they're going to see us driving by, and we're real people. I think that's going to make it much more likely that they're going to open our emails versus some person who lives in Indonesia that they've never met before.
All right. Do you know, Matt, about what you average from an open rate perspective to prospects?
To prospects, we're at about a third. So about 33% is what we're averaging. Now for parent communication, it's about 65 to 70%. Keep in mind, though, that we do email both parents. And so lots of times you'll find, one of the parents will be the ones that is responsible for kind of school stuff. And so the other parent doesn't open those emails.
I remember you saying once, I think on another call, that you actually use your open rate to gauge how engaged parents are.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the things that I'd really love to get into with Entreport and our CRM. And again, hey, just giving everybody the sneak preview of what we want to get to for Nito in the future. But I'd love to be able to really have an engagement rating, for lack of a better word, from parents. Because what a great tool to be able to use when and if you get to the point that you have a waiting list and you're making decisions about, who's going to get into your elementary program or who's going to get into your primary program. Really, why would I want to give preference to somebody that never engages with what we're writing? Like, that is a big red flag. Nobody ever opens your emails. Nobody ever reads your stuff. Why would, that at the very least, that is a impetus to having a conversation with them about their level of engagement with the school.
Wow, I love that. That's another great pro tip too.
Now, that's a whole separate thing about how to develop and use that data in some type of software program, Entreport or whatever. But I think that it could be extremely useful for because it gives you another level of context, right? So we always have this idea that this we can always kind of generally feel when people are disengaged, and we don't like it. But when we actually have data saying, gosh, versus everybody else, you're never, you're not opening up our weekly emails, you're not attending our parent education events, you're not doing, you're not coming to our community events. Why would we? This relationship doesn't feel solid, I guess. And if I'm going to have to make a choice between you and somebody in another family, of course I'm going to choose a family that's engaged.
Very well said.
I think also, Matt, it saves your sanity because, those are the things that keep you up at night when you're trying to figure out why something is not working. So if you have actual data for that, you can be more efficient and streamline your efforts versus like trying to, shot in the dark and trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, because you're talking about the difference between I feel like this family is disengaged versus I know this family is disengaged on one level.
Right. That's huge.
Absolutely.
After open rate, we want to look at click-through rate. What's interesting about click-through rate, though, is not always an indicator of success because you don't always have something to click through to. So if your email stands alone, don't worry about click-through rate. It's no big deal. But if you're, marketing a blog post, then the way you would gauge the success of the interest of that post is to see who clicked through to your email. And every single email service provider provides this data. I'm assuming so. If there's one that isn't, you shouldn't use them because they're not doing their job. And then the very last one is unsubscribe rate. Does anybody opt out of your list and why? Now, again, we want to reframe what this means. Don't let it hurt your feelings, but you do want to pay attention to when you get opt-outs. If you send off an email and notice that you get a flurry of opt-outs, then look at that email, the subject, the timing, and see if there's a reason that you might be repelling some folks. And we have a question from Nicole. She says, I have a question about allowing parents the option to unsubscribe, which is required in MailChimp. We haven't been using MailChimp to communicate with parents, though we use it for general marketing to other lists because we send information that I want to make sure parents get. Parent-teacher conference is coming up, our weather closing policy, etc. If a parent were to unsubscribe from the list, then we wouldn't be able to communicate key information. Thoughts on that? Matt, I'm going to throw that at you.
Could you repeat that question, please?
Yeah, so Nicole hasn't been using MailChimp for parent communication because she doesn't want parents to be able to opt out because the information is critical. And so their ability to opt out can hurt their ability to receive critical updates from the school.
I'm still confused about what the question is.
I'm probably not saying it correctly. Deneen, help?
Yep. So Nicole has her list and she uses MailChimp for prospective parents, but she doesn't use it for current parents because she wants to make sure that the information the parents get, that they actually get it. So if she were to use MailChimp for her current parents, she's worried that if they unsubscribe, they won't get that information. So what is your way around that, Matt? Because it sounds like you use MailChimp for both any and everything. So how have you run into that problem? And if so, what do you do to alleviate it?
Okay, understood. So I don't use MailChimp for prospective parents. We only use MailChimp for currently enrolled parents. So it's two separate things. So they're basically in two separate databases. One is prospective parents up into admission. And once they're admitted and they're enrolled in a classroom, then I'm using MailChimp for school weekly emails, for guides to be able to email through that remailing service I mentioned. So I don't run into that problem.
So what she's asking though is when you use current parent or MailChimp for current parents, what happens if they opt out of that? They unsubscribe? to your list with when there's pertinent information in those emails?
So normally that happens by accident. I don't think I've actually ever had parents unsubscribe from content that's coming from the school about their child. That's I don't think that's ever happened. It's because, again, this is our weekly classroom update. This is our this is stuff that they actually need to know, and so it's much more likely that they're just going to delete it and not open it versus unsubscribe.
Right. So then for Nicole, it might just be a risk worth taking, and it sounds like from Matt's point, a very minimal risk.
I've never experienced it.
Yeah, of your parents not getting the information that you need. So especially, Nicole, if it makes your life easier, because MailChimp tends to, maybe go that route. I think that would be a good idea.
One addition is that MailChimp allows you to modify the unsubscribes based on the list that they're subscribed to. And you've probably experienced this yourself. Anytime you unsubscribe from a list, it takes you to a page, and sometimes it'll say, which of these lists do you want to unsubscribe from? And one of the things you can do, I believe, is segment the list so you have, your current parents, and you could even call it like your parent communication list, and then you have your marketing list. And you can have people on multiple lists. So, your current parents can also be on your marketing list, so that if they unsubscribe from your marketing list, they're not necessarily unsubscribing from your parent communication list.
Pro tip.
#Nito. From our members, we've got about 4 minutes left. Questions, ideas, comments, compliments? And while we're waiting, I just want to remind everyone that we do this every week. It's Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to do it for as long as we have something to say. And David said, great stuff today. We're drafting our newsletter now. Perfect timing. Awesome. Glad to hear it. Oh, you know what, Deneen? Can I let the cat out of the bag with your idea? Or actually, can you let the cat out of the bag with your idea? The Facebook request you're going to offer up?
Wait, which one? Facebook? What?
Asking for input on our webinars.
Oh, yes. I'm going to ask all of you about ideas. We're planning to create a webinar that helps explain Montessori education in about 15 minutes. And I'm curious what our members have experienced with that. We've all been able to talk about that with parents. So if you had like one or two things that you could for sure see in that 15-minute video, what would that be? So look out for that. It'll probably be in the next week or so. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts to make sure that, we're incorporating all of your ideas. I can sit and think, and I know Matt and Qasim can do that too, but it would be great to hear other people's perspectives and experiences in the conversations as we try to, help people understand what Montessori is about in a simple way, right? Because that's the hardest thing, is we can talk and talk and talk, but those pointed explanations of what we do are going to be key. That's why we're keeping it at 15 minutes.
Well said. And to put this in context, this is going to be an asset for you to use. So we're going to create these webinars, and it'll be a video that you can host on your website if you want. You can use for marketing. You can send to parents. You can put in your email newsletter. And the idea is that it ends up being a powerful asset that you can utilize for parents that are new to the Montessori message and probably need a little bit of, can I use the word indoctrination without it sounding bad?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's in your best interest to give us some ideas, because you can definitely use this and make sure that your voice is heard.
Yeah. And that'll be coming out on Facebook soon. So if you're not a part of our Facebook group, make sure to join. You can find it by just going straight to the NITO website, and there's a Facebook icon. Just click on that, and that'll bring you straight to us. Other than that, Deneen, Matt, thank you so much for being here as always.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll talk to everybody next week.
All right. Talk to you guys next week. Bye.